So here we have an A2 sheet of paper where we've put down a simple floor plan layout. We've also got an elevation and a section and another elevation. We've also got a title panel down below, a very simple title panel. You could do this how you wish. Now, what I would suggest is that once you've drawn each element, you arrange them on a page so that they actually line up, and you can sort of see there's some order here. So even the distance between that title and the distance between this title and the fact that they are centered, and the same thing happens as it goes across here. So you see these elevations sort of line up and the titles line up, and the distance that we extend our floor line and ceiling lines across is all quite uniform. So that makes the drawing easy to see. So once you've got that, you could have got a piece of trace paper like this and traced over it in ink. So that would be one way. I traced over it freehand in pencil, so I would be using one of these. And what I've done is I've photocopied this, but you could have photocopied the ink version. So the paper version ends up looking something like this. So you might have to experiment if you're photocopying pencil, because if you do it too light, you won't be able to see what's happening, and you can sort of see that this elevation is very hard to see, but I can make it out, but I don't know if you can. And there's that one there. So some of the lines may get lost, so you need to be careful or cautious. So one option would be to have gone over this trace paper version, just do it in ink straight up. But I'm going to show you some line work and some backlining and how we go about doing text. So before we do that, I'm going to show you some of the pens that I'm using. So you could use any fine liner. So you could use fine liners like these kind of type, which are in 0.2, 0.5, 0.8 and so on. Or you could use some other ones, but any that you think work pretty well. A good thing is to have a scrap piece of paper like I've got here. And what I'm going to do is have a look at, so when you look at this tip, what you'd want to do is make sure that you're not using the pen like that. I would be trying keeping it fairly straight, because that's how it's measuring the width of that 0.3 pen. So here's one which is 0.3. So there's some line work for that. So we've got that one. So now we know what that looks like. We've also got a 0.2, which looks like this. So now we have a 0.2. And we've also got 0.5. So again, we're going to practice what that 0.5 looks like. Now this paper is the same as this paper. So you could photocopy this onto cartridge paper, which is a little bit nicer, and it'd be good to render on it. So I'm going to be using these three, and I think that's enough. I might also use, maybe if I want to do a ground line or something like that, I might use a thicker marker. So maybe that's sort of like a 1mm thick pen. Okay, maybe a 0.7. So you can see that that is thicker. So these are going to be my tools. So I'm going to keep it simple. I'm going to go over everything in a 0.2. So I think that'd be good. Go over everything in a 0.2, nearly everything. And then we're going to backline maybe with a 0.5, because we're looking at a scale of 1 to 50. So a 0.5 to highlight these walls. So let's get into it. So you can go about this your own way, but what I'm going to do is maybe just do all the lines that are in a particular direction. If you're doing longer lines, you might have to bend or move your arm because the line is so long. Now, it doesn't matter if it's a little bit wobbly. Wobbly is okay, because it gives it some character. So we all like to see a little bit of character in our drawings. Now what I'm going to do also is maybe cross my lines as I do it. So I'll put in this furniture as well. So I'm going to go over this. Now the beauty about this, having it all done and not guessing, is that I can then just work at my own sort of speed and just place all these lines in. So I'm going to continue to do that. So over here we're going to go right over the window, doors and openings. Okay, so we're going to try and complete all of this. And the good thing about doing it freehand, and if it's got a bit of character, it doesn't matter if it's a bit wonky. Okay, so it's a bit wonky. Now what? You're not going to say the wall's wonky. It's all okay. So you might want to practice if you're going in an upwards direction away from you, or if you're coming down. What you want to do is try and do one continuous line with no joins. And add all the detail in. So we're going to add where, in this case, there's a window here. And we're going to show where the glazing is in the center. And the same thing here, we'll put in our door frame, door leaves, frame, and door. So I'm going to continue that at a faster speed. Okay, so once I've gone through all that, what I'm going to do is now go over the walls in my 0.5 pen. So we want to really highlight what's happening here, and it's a good idea maybe to do a bit of a practice. So it might be good to draw some walls that you already have that you can practice on. So what we mean by backlining is then we're going to go over these walls to highlight them. Now I'm not pressing hard on these type of pens because they've got quite a soft tip, so that really highlights the walls as opposed to having a wall which looked like this before. Okay, so it's a good idea to practice on a spare sheet of paper here and then translate it here, because you only get one go at it with ink on paper. So I'm going to turn this a little bit, make it easier for me, but we're going to go over these walls. So when it gets to this wall, we want to highlight that area and this area, but not that window. So we get to here and we want to then highlight this nib of that wall and then to this opening. So you can sort of get an idea of what's happening there. So when you're looking at a floor plan, the important part is the room layouts. So that's the thing that we're going to try and highlight. So we want that to stand out quite a bit. So if you've got some walls that are a bit not straight, what you could do is just straighten them out at this point. That's a good way to fix up any errors that may have happened. as you were trying to trace it correctly. Now I'm looking at this, and I might even switch it to in this instance, maybe even a 0.8, and see what that looks like. So the next thing we're going to look at is text. I've got some lines that I've drawn here at the height of the text that I want. So this is a 7mm high text, a 5, a 3, a 2.5. So maybe the room names might suit for it to be a 3.5, because that's what we've used there. And I've put the room size underneath in a 2.5mm high text. And then we have the labels here. I've chosen to do them at 5, but you could do them at 7 as well. So with text, you might want to have a bit of a practice. So have a look at the text here. If the text is quite square, you'll find it'll look quite good. So keep them close together and square and consistent. So you might have to have a bit of a practice. So if you're doing 3.5 text, well then I'd be using a 0.3. So I've drawn some guidelines here to show how thick and how we want that text to look. But if you want to write, for example, a floor plan, you would be concentrating on doing quite thick letters, and you might have to experiment. Some people cross their letters over. Sometimes that can look a bit distracting, but it's got personality. So if we write floor plan again, and make sure that your text goes from top to that bottom of that guideline, you can adjust where that crosses over and how high that is. So now we've got a nice square, it's not curved. Okay, so even the letter O can have, so nice plump letters is the way to go. So it's nice and neat. So have a go at that, practice a few letters, write it first here, and then you can practice on here. So I've just written it quite simple here, and simple is okay, but you might practice doing that. Here we've got, I would have put, if I was doing this on butter paper or trace paper, you can put this underneath, and then you could, so here we have some butter paper, so you could put that underneath and just write along there. That would be the best way to do it. So I'm just going to go over this. So now's the easy part. So I could, so we want consistent letters. So if I was doing this straight on trace paper, I could then erase what I've written before. And so then we've got text which is, say for this bedroom or this living area, now I'll use a 0.3 because this is the same thickness as the text. So we'll do the same thing. So on normal paper, these kind of pens tend to bleed. So you just need to be a little bit careful. And finally, we've got the smaller text. So here we've got that this is 3500 by 500. And we could go in, they might be okay. So I might just leave those. And then the other one that we've got is, for example, for the site boundary. So here we have a site boundary, it's 0.8. So I'm going to put that in. And put this one in as well. Okay, so now we have a site boundary. Now when you're doing elevations, the same thing applies. So normally I would go over this in 0.3, go over the whole thing in a 0.3. But because we're tracing, you might choose to go over the whole, you've already got the line, so I might just straight up go over it and use my 0.5 to do the walls. Now, this section of the wall is a little bit closer, and that section is pushed back a bit. So we're going to first put in where our doors and windows are in our thinnest marker. So here we've got a frame. I've drawn these that they're approximately 50 mil, a frame that is. So it doesn't matter that they're a bit squiggly. Now, of course, you could rule all of this, and that's not a problem either. So now what we're going to look at is there's a floor and ceiling line. So we'll put in this dimension plus the floor to ceiling line, and then that goes right along there. So I'm going to finish it off out here. I'm going to do the same here. So there's a floor to ceiling line. So try and keep the dashes consistent. So the same length, and that way they won't get confused with anything. And then I'll continue this dimension line. And normally what I would do is, so we'll label it. We have a ceiling line, we have a floor line, and we'll go up to the next size and put in our dimension tick where it's measuring from. And I might go over these walls. So the same concept with the walls here, we're going to highlight these walls. So the closest walls, if we had walls that were a little bit further back, we would then do those in a thinner pen, maybe like a 0.3. So now that's highlighted more than the openings. We should see that happening. If you find that it's not really happening, which I'm sort of feeling that it's not, I might actually use this 0.8 and see what that looks like. Now again, you might want to try this here first. So I might draw that little section. So there we have that top section, 0.3, and then that's it in a 0.3, but then we might say, well, okay, what if we went over it in a 0.5? Is that too thick? So you need to make a judgment. So I think it might stand out a little bit more. So I'm going to do that. So there are no, specific rules, but there's general concept. We want to highlight the walls on this elevation. So I think that's standing out a lot better. And it all depends on the medium you're using. So some papers bleed, depends how you hold your pen and so on. So then we'll put in this ground line. So we want to see a nice heavy ground line. So I might end up going over this twice because it resembles the walls. So I'm going to hit it again. Now, because this is a design drawing, you could make this ground line quite heavy, or you could make it quite wide, but maybe make it a colour. Could be this grey. So now we've seen, a nice heavy ground line. We see our walls, and we would do the same for the section. So for your section, it's the same concept. So when we're looking at a section, we're wanting to highlight what's happening with the structure. So we've got a roof structure, a wall structure, a floor structure. So there's quite a few things that have to go on here, but the concept is exactly the same. So since I've used that 0.8, I think I'm going to use that here. So I'm just going to go straight into it and put it in. So effectively I am backlining because I've already got the lines here. So we have one roof structure that looks like this. So it's a gutter here. And then we have our walls. Now with this wall, I'm going to, put in the wall there, and that's actually a door. So I'm going to leave that and do that a bit thinner. So we've got our footings. So we've got a concrete slab here. And we're going to bring this parapet up to show this wall structure all the way down, and then we've got a concrete slab. And this concrete slab is off the ground line here, and what we're going to do is put in our ground line. So we're going to do it nice and thick like we did our elevation one. So we're going to extend this one all the way out to here. Okay. And the next thing we're going to do is then put in all the detail. So out with a 0.3. So you could use a 0.2 if you have one, but this is all I have. So I'm just going to go in and put all this detail in. So again, we've got floor lines. We've got a floor line here. So we're trying to match what's happening on both sides. It's not super critical, but it just makes it a lot neater. And then there's some extra lines, which actually, there's a floor line there. There's a ceiling line here. So that's all done. There's quite a thin line, so I'm just going to take it easy here. This is in the background. So that's the wall beyond. And there's also the top of the parapet, which we need to see. So I'm going to try to just very lightly put that in. And you can see that's a lot lighter than, than doing that, than that. Okay, so there is a difference. And then we're going to put in our opening. So we've got our door. There's a frame. And there's the glazing. There's a frame here. So there's some furniture that we see as well. So as we see that, there's some sort of cabinet here. There's a fold-out table which comes out. So we'll show the thickness of that top. And our kitchen area that we cut through, which I've already sketched in. Now, I'm just showing those quite thin because they're further back. There is a roof line here. It sort of looks okay, so I might just put that in a little bit heavier, just to give the illusion that there is a roof line there. And that would be enough. So now we go in with our 0.3, we label our room. And we can switch to our 0.5 to label our section. So same thing, nice big font letters. Okay, so there's our section done, complete. There's some other things that I might want to add, but we'll talk about those later.